All right, I don't know what time it is on your clock, but I know what I'm getting ready for. It is time for the Professional CISO Podcast with David Malicoat.
Welcome, one and all, to the Professional CISO Show. I'm your host, David Malicoat. This show is an exploration of the topics necessary to make the role of CISO to that of a professional. All right, gang, start of a new, I don't want to call it series per se, but a new thing here on the Professional CISO Show. So we have a friend of the show on today, Shawn Tuma, and he's been on before. We had the regular episode with Shawn. In this case, Shawn wrote a book, plus what Shawn does, which quarterback for cybersecurity incidents. Could not think of a better friend of the show to have on a regular basis. And so Shawn has agreed to do that as well. So we're talking, quarterly, depending upon what subject matter or whatever is good. But in the end, having a resource like this to come in and talk to us on a regular basis, to me is huge. And I truly appreciate, Shawn, you coming on and providing your expertise and your voice to the show.
Well, David, it's my pleasure to be here. I enjoyed the heck out of it last time, as we'll talk more about a little later, and just appreciate all you've done to help me with the book and the ideas and just carrying this mission forward,
Awesome.
Which I think helps everybody.
Truly appreciate it. All right, but before we begin, huge reminder. So I've kind of test watered this a little bit. We have a Christmas episode that we're going to do, and it's coming out the week of Christmas. And so just to tease it a little bit, there's a longstanding tradition in my family that we like to observe, and I want to share that with my audience and with the show's audience. So good news is, nothing about cybersecurity. And so in the end, stay tuned, watch for that to come out. We're really excited for it because, again, it's just a change of pace, and I think it's good for the season and just kind of good to do something a little bit different. So stay tuned for that. And then follow, like, share. Best way to continue to get the great content that you're getting. We're seeing this every week. I think we've grown every week on that Apple and Spotify. Hit the follow button. On YouTube, hit that subscribe. Maybe hit the little bell to get the reminders when we come out. Follow us on LinkedIn. And then finally, you enjoy it, you know somebody that you think might enjoy it, share with a friend or colleague. All right, so let's talk about being a professional CISO. In today's episode, Shawn Tuma, as I said before, friend of the show, guest, attorney extraordinaire. We can go high on that.
Whatever it is, man. It's just Shawn.
Just don't call me late to dinner, right?
That's right.
All right, man. So we want to talk about the book, right? And I think that was part of the concentration. I mean, we're gonna cover it. Because what books, you read them, they're great. Read it. Great. I found, for me personally, I'm going back now to other sections because it's dense, and that's not an indictment. That is like a testament to what you've put down on, I say on paper, but on the Kindle. Or on
it's a challenge. It was a challenge, and the interesting thing that the audience may not know is I was midway through that book when I came and did the last episode, and I was at a point of wringing my hands going, am I going to make this? I had to have it done by mid-August.
Right.
Am I going to get this done? And it was really our conversation that helped me so much. The encouragement of, hey, you might be onto something here that I didn't know because I hadn't really talked about it with anybody. And so it was way more dense when I converted it to a Word document. I was at about 650 pages, and I had to cut out lots. So I have each chapter, I had to cut out enough to make probably a small book now, But what I learned through the process is when you're trying to cover a lot of issues, you can't go too deep into them. And so that's why it's great to have conversations.
I totally agree. I was going to say, that's exactly what I was going to say. So now we get to talk about a little bit, go into some nuance. I would say to add to that point, you surprised me because you showed up, because I just wanted to have you on the show. I had no idea you were writing a book. And you showed up that morning here and you were like, oh, by the way, I'm writing a book. I'm like, wow, what? what a privilege, number one, because honestly, we got to be the first people to say that it was happening.
Yeah.
And then it became a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit, I think.
Then I had to.
Yeah,
do
then you
it.
had to do
I
it because you were
couldn't back
committed.
out.
You got chicken and the pig for breakfast, right? You were definitely the pig for breakfast on that one. Okay, so let's roll into this. And keep in mind, audience, I chose some, not at random, but like just I walked through kind of the outline and I saw some things. I'm like, okay, these are interesting to me now. Again, with Shawn being a guest of the show on the regular, we're going to do more of these. And so, but maybe first, before we get into it, you cover insurance in the book, but pre-taping, we were talking about insurance and kind of some of the things that have happened. So can you give us the quick update on what you're seeing out in the world? And then I think, we can kind of replay that conversation a little bit.
Yeah, we're seeing things happen very, very quickly in the insurance world right now. As I was writing the book, and then a year or so ago, when I was about to speak at a conference, then in June when I was writing the book, I reached out to several insurance professionals that I know to see if there was a specific product for CISOs. And the answer at that time was no.
And for clarity, we're talking about CISO liability,
That's right.
personal liability, career liability, separate and above. From
like we attorneys have malpractice insurance.
Right.
So if a claim gets brought against us for our work in the profession, then we have coverage to defend that. So we're really looking at something like that for CISOs now, or the professional liability, the E&O coverage or D&O coverage if you're an executive or director.
And so for those that may not have explored into this world a little bit, maybe let's do a little bit of basics. We're talking about this liability insurance. Ultimately, it comes down to protecting your personal assets not as it relates to, almost in spite of the work that you do. So somebody could sue you, and you would potentially have to give up personal assets if you were to maybe lose that lawsuit. Is that correct?
So that's one component. So to put it in a way you and I both know very well, think Joe Sullivan, think Tim Brown, right? Usually when there's a case brought against the CISO and the company is going to have an aligned interest in representing that CISO as well to keep them all on the same team, right? It's in all of our best interest to defend this together. Divide and conquer is the first strategy of the opponents.
Right.
So the company's going to have an interest, and they're probably going to pay for your legal counsel. Your interests will be aligned but not identical, so it's advisable that you have separate legal counsel from the company. Not necessarily at the outset, but if it becomes clear that there may be some divergence in interest, right?
And before we go too much further, do we want to do the standard lawyer spiel, attorney spiel on this is not?
Oh yeah, this is not legal advice. This is me just, Shawn, talking like I'm talking at a conference about random stuff. It's all hypothetical.
Understood.
Right?
Understood.
All hypothetical. But we lawyers don't work for free.
Right.
And so somebody's got to pay those legal bills.
Right.
And the company may pay them. They may pay them up to a certain point, or they may have their insurance pay them. If their insurance is paying them, they may object to covering the CISO if you're not covered within that policy. These are products that are designed to protect the CISO. They will pay those legal fees and provide that kind of coverage. So that's really what we're looking at.
Right. And I think learnings from, and by the time this is out, we'll have the Joe Sullivan interview will be out, which you attended in person. Thank you very much. And he had to sue Uber. He filed a lawsuit on Uber to get them to cover him, from what I understand. And then I think with Tim Brown specifically, he's talked at volume about this, but his company's executive team is in the bunker with him. Yeah. And they've spent significant amounts of dollars, of company dollars, to be able to help defend him. That's not a guarantee.
No. I mean,
those are exceptions, right?
But they're not a guarantee.
Right.
Typically, so if I'm in the litigation aspect and I'm on the adversary side, I'm trying to divide them. I'm trying to raise claims or issues that are going to create separation there. Because if you can turn the CISO, you've now got
Right.
a better angle on the company, right? If I'm the company side, I'm trying to keep everybody together. My first objective is keep my team together. So we're trying to pay the fees and do all that, even if it means bringing in counsel specific for them, right? But litigation can be long and hard and go years and take its toll on people.
Right.
So you never know how it may go. So the point is, since June, there are now options out there for getting this kind of coverage when there really wasn't when I was checking back.
And one of the things I've seen and I've had Val Mukherjee on with Cyber Future Foundation, and they just launched the PAC, Professional Association of CISOs, I believe it is, if I'm not wrong. If I am, I'm sorry, by the way. But
I think that's what it is.
I think that's what it is.
PAC.
Yeah, PAC.
And
That's what I said. It stuck in my head. I was PAC.
Yeah.
And that's one of the components of it as well, is having an association that you belong to that now on the back end through whether dues or whatever, you're now underwritten through a group policy, it seems.
Yeah.
Any advice on that as far as what should we be looking for as individuals if we were seeking to join that association? Is there any advice that you'd, probably not advice, any things that we would want to look at as a CISO as we go into more of a group policy type situation?
Yeah, so, I haven't seen that policy.
Correct.
I know, and Val and I go back many years. I was first General Counsel of CFF.
Got it.
And even though I'm totally unqualified to be a GC. It's a very reputable underwriter, carrier that they're using. So I have no doubt that it's going to be an excellent policy. I would say what you always want to look for is what coverages are available. So how does it define your role and what are your coverages? How much is your premium? How much is your coverage and what exclusions are there, right? One of the key issues that's going to always be of concern is when you make an allegation of something like intentional misconduct, because a lot of insurance products don't cover that. And an intentional act or something grossly negligent, something like that. So if let's say the government or a plaintiff is making a claim that you acted grossly negligent, you want to make sure that policy's not going to bar that claim until there's been an actual determination that happened, not just the allegation, because it's going to be an allegation in every case. So I haven't seen the CFF PAC policy, but I have seen a competing product that's out there, and I read their policy language, and I know it does cover that nuance, so that's important.
So it sounds a little like gamesmanship that happens, because this is kind of a theme I'm getting already kind of so far. There's a gamesmanship that happens that maybe CISOs are maybe a little naive about, just because we haven't grown up in that world, right? In tech to executive type thing. So I think it's great to be able to kind of say, expect that gamesmanship, expect the divide and conquer strategy, expect that they're going to try to do the disbarment situation.
Yeah, they're going to try to put the most pressure on the parties as possible, and they're going to use whatever tactics are available. And I say this as someone who litigated for a long time and still do in appropriate cases. But your objective is to win at the end of the day, and if you can divide those parties, if you can raise claims that may put fear in them of, I may have more to lose here. I mean, this is ransomware strategy.
Push to settle, right?
I mean,
push to pay.
How do I put the pressure on?
Right.
And so that absolutely happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so I think the key for takeaways for CISOs or folks that are looking to in leadership roles in cybersecurity, expect those things, right? I think, and make sure, and obviously collaborate. I think one thing would want to touch on is attorney-client privilege, real quick. What should a CISO or someone in a leadership position think about or understand relative to attorney-client privilege when it comes to these type of situations?
Well, understand that when you are an employee of a company and the company hires legal counsel, that legal counsel represents the company, and unless they are specifically representing you as a client as well, named in the engagement, which is unlikely, they are the company's lawyer, right? So that means the company holds the privilege over communications which means the company, not you, may have the choice to waive that privilege at a later time. So if something changes and the parties get misaligned and there were privileged communications that you want to use but the company doesn't want to use, the company holds that privilege and they get to make that decision. So I'm in no way suggesting you can't work with and have companies' legal counsel represent you or represent your interest in most cases, because most you don't need to overcomplicate it.
Right.
But there may be exceptional circumstances where you will need your own counsel.
And so it's an awareness, right? I think that's really
it's issue spotting.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's funny. I always have folks. I'm always thinking about different scenarios, and maybe that's the military background or whatever. But from my perspective, I go, and people come to me and be like, "Why are you even thinking about that?" We're putting the cart before the horse. I'm like, scenario-based thinking. I don't want to be surprised when I'm confronted with that if it happens, right? And I've at least thought it through and think about what my reaction may be, right? And I think this is an excellent case of that.
That's one more area where legal is so closely aligned to cybersecurity. The unknown unknowns, we try to prepare, we try to plan ahead and think, but we have no idea what's really going to happen. And we're dealing with human nature, you know. So there's that synergy in how we attack and approach problems and defend problems and think about that.
Love it. Okay, let's dive into the book then.
Yeah.
So one of the ones I want to go with was chapter 5, talking about GCs and CISOs and understanding each other's world. And so a key theme of this section is like a cross understanding, right? So it's not just CISO trying to understand the GC, or it is both, right? There's a special nexus there that tends to happen. So can you talk about some of the challenges around getting there?
Yeah. So part of the goal in writing the book was to help CISOs issue spot areas where they need to be collaborating with their legal teams. But the other part was to help legal teams understand and issue spot areas where they need to be collaborating with their security teams. And what I realized along the way is, number one, we're the defenders in our role of the organization. We're cost centers, right? We're the Department of No. We stop bad things from happening. We don't always make wonderful, beautiful things happen.
Well, and the good bad is a continuum.
It's a continuum,
right?
Yeah.
So it's not like we can just say, "Oh, we stop all the bad things," but there's no good things that remain unaffected, right? So also know that that's in it, right?
And to the continuum, we live in the grays.
Right.
We can't give absolute answers. Neither role.
The attorney answer, it depends.
So we have that it depends. So we have that challenge at the outset. We have the fact that we're both protectors by nature at the outset. That makes it hard to work together. And so then we have our own unique language, our own terminology that we use. Get in a room full of CISOs, or especially the hyper-technical CISOs, and the more uncertain the conversation gets, the more you dive into the nuances and the tricky phrases and all that. Same with law, same with legal. And so part of the challenge is learning to just understand each other's language and talk about things in simple, plain terms without using all the buzzwords that we lawyers love to use. Usually they're in Latin and they're italicized, and it makes us feel so special and important to say them.
Paying off that law degree.
You got to, yeah. and so it's part of just learning to work together and talk in a common, normal way about real issues.
How do I do that so if I dumb it down, we're all smart people, right? We're all very, very smart.
Yeah.
And so how do I bridge that gap without insult, without assuming too much? Because we understand what assume does to people, right? Yeah. Or because I always try to go into it, and I say, I'll say something typically, and it may sound a little trite, or it sounds a little explanatory, and I'll say, I don't want to talk above or below you, but here's what I'm seeing. Do you get what I'm saying? Is that a right approach? Is that it
may be the only approach you have. But you do need to to understand who you're dealing with and what their level of knowledge is. And the real point of that is you get that through having the relationship. And the whole point of the book, the biggest goal of the book, is to start building the relationship, to spot issues where you can have a conversation, you start getting to know each other. And look, you may look at the book and go, this guy's an idiot. He has no idea what he's talking about here. That's fine. If it gets you talking and having that conversation, my goal's accomplished. But when you have that relationship, you start to know how much they understand of a ransomware threat versus a business email compromise type thing, or, what a SOC is, I mean,
Right.
Because until you have that relationship, you're having to guess, and they're having to guess of how much do you know about business risk and the challenges they're dealing with. And so the relationship is the foundation of that.
What recommendations do you have? I'm going in fresh, maybe new GC, maybe I'm new, but we're just starting that out. Is that just, hey, let's get some time on the calendar, maybe even away from the office, grab a cup of coffee? There's been many people who sat in that seat and other seats that I've interviewed that have said, just talking about the other person's world. So if you're the GC, I'm the CISO, and I say, Shawn, talk to me about your biggest challenge right now. Talk to me about, can you explain to, XYZ? Is that a good approach? Is that where you should pretty much start if you don't know where to start?
Yeah. I think start with coffee, start with lunch, take the pressure off, take the agenda out of it, and just start getting to know the person and empathize with the challenges that they're facing, and understand that in our world, in security, it's the biggest threat. I mean, I say this and I mean this. In my view, for any company that's not physically doing business in the Ukraine, cybersecurity is the biggest existential risk they face, because one click of a button can shut everything down. That's my world. That's the world you and I see. You go to a GC, they got risks all over the place that could shut it down. It may not be immediate. So help just open that door, have coffee, have lunch, go for happy hour, but make an effort to get to know them as a person and understand you're all going to be busy. But that's where you can tell them, hey, look, you and I are in this together. We're both challenged in what we're trying to do. Let's just get to know each other a little bit so we can figure out how to better work together. And I think that'll go a lot farther than, hey, I need a meeting for 30 minutes so we can cover X, Y, Z, because then what you're going to do is you're going to be focused on that agenda. You're not going to sit down and truly get to know that person. And if you get to know them, the relationship will start to follow.
Right, and then you can have the agenda after that.
And so I talk to GCs who ironically want that also. They just don't always know. They don't take the time to think about it on their list of things they need to do. So it's incumbent upon the CISO to initiate this.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Chapter 11, developing joint policies and protocols. So this struck my eye, obviously reading it as well. Joint policies. So let's start there. So when we're talking about, I write a policy, we're working together to put this policy forth. Can you talk me through your view of the world when it comes to joint policies and protocols?
Yeah, the best example of this is your incident response plan. That is exhibit A as far as importance goes, because legal is not going to have a lot of insight into the technical aspects of an incident response. You're going to take the lead in drafting the bulk of that plan. They're not going to care about pages 10 through 50 or however many you have. It has nothing to do with what they're doing. That's technical stuff. What they care about is that first page, the second, the third, the contact list, right? Because there is a huge legal realm in your incident response. The legal issues are what drive your disclosure obligations, your notification obligations, reporting many times these days now to business partners. That's going to be a function of contract. Reporting to individuals or regulators, that's going to be a product of the laws. Now we've got law enforcement reporting coming up, for critical infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all legal that drives that. So you need to have legal involved, not necessarily critiquing deep down into the plan, but make sure you're in alignment with them on, hey, what's our top priorities here? Those kind of things. So that's not something that should be done in a vacuum by one side or the other. And I see cases where I see legal departments try to do the incident response plan. I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Yeah, the first page or two, you got it.
So from a practical perspective, is this a case where, okay, I'm revamping or I'm writing my first incident response plan for this company? Do I give the heads up to the GC, say, hey, oh, by the way, I'm starting to write the incident response plan. I'm going to first draft it. It's not going to be perfect. Just we all know that, right? But the whole idea is we're going to get better over time. We're going to iterate on this continuous improvement process. I draft it. Hey, send it over. Is that a collaborative session that we walk through it? Is that a send it over to the other side of the fence, let them review it? Are we redlining it like we do with contracts? Like, how does that
So
look?
it's going to depend on the sophistication
Of course.
of the organization. But it would probably be a first, I'm going to send it over to you. You're going to look at it, redline it, make some key comments, and then send it back to me. I'm going to look and see, are these significant? Should I make these changes, right? Because we're building on the value of their perspective here. And we may say, oh yeah, hey, that's right, I didn't think about that. Then from there, it becomes collaborative. So from there, that's where you need to start talking about this. And what you're doing while you're talking about this is you're preparing for your incident, okay? This is part of your preparation. The very best incident response plans I've ever seen, they get put together in a whiteboard meeting where everybody starts talking about issues. They whiteboard it out. Somebody takes a picture of it. Man, that's real world.
And drives that document that way.
Exactly. So it's morphing from your drafting into your preparation, because now you're identifying key parties, key issues, and you can focus in on those as you move forward.
So if I'm there and I'm wanting to push this forward, for an incident response plan, if I say, Shawn, can you give me a compelling reason, like something that's so compelling that I can get all those people in that room for that period of time, even if it's just an hour, because everybody's busy, like we talked about. So what's that piece of advice to the CISO saying, what can I say to these folks to compel them to show up and make it, what's in it for them?
Yeah. So the first phase of this is going to be CISO and legal. Right. And it's probably not the GC of most organizations. It's going to be some, counterpart.
Right. Somebody in the org.
In the org.
There you go.
You're going to come up with how you both think it should work. And from there, what I then call this is it's an educational session. We're bringing in our key players. It's not a tabletop as we understand it.
Right.
It's a training. It's hey, let's get to know what our obligations are. And that can be done pretty quickly. And so you bring in your key people. Hey, we've drafted this incident response plan. We think we've got a really good one, but we want to talk through some of these most important issues with our key stakeholders and bring them in. So this is going to be your operations. This is going to be your corporate communications. This is going to be your risk officer, all these different people. And say, I want to talk about how we've identified your role and how you're going to handle that role. And oh, by the way, if you're unavailable, who's going to be your backup, right? And that gives them buy-in too, because a lot of times these people, they're busy. They don't want more tasks, but they do want to be respected and have their role respected as part of the process. So by having short, to the point sessions,
well prepared,
not coming in, how's your Monday, blah, blah, blah. Hey, how's everybody doing?
Or a skeleton draft, right?
We're going to work our way through this,
Right.
And so to me, you gain more understanding and buy in through that process, and you get feedback that really, really helps make your team better. I mean, think of it as your football playbook, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we got the Dallas Cowboys over here right now. Okay, we got other teams. You know,
So much can be said. So much can be said right there.
You know, but then we got to practice it. We got to vet it. We've got to teach people their roles and responsibilities.
Slow is smooth is fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, we got time for one more.
You mean we're not going to cover all the things?
We're not going to cover. Of course we're not. You know how that is. Okay, critical incident response. So we were talking about the plan, right? But let's, what is it and what are our GCs and CISOs roles? So let's talk specifically about critical incident response, because this is one of the things, again, as I read through this, I was like, yeah, that's because it's different, right?
Yeah.
And so first off, you differentiate between routine and critical.
Yeah.
So can you highlight what those differences are and why you wanted to cover that, and then specifically for GC and CISO?
Yeah. So what led to this was repeated situations where I would be brought in as the breach guide, breach quarterback or whatever. And the CISO, who I'd never have known, never had a relationship with, is sitting there looking into the camera going, why am I listening to this guy talk about incident response? I know incident response. I do incident response every day. That's true. You do as CISO. There are incidents happening in every organization as you and I sit here.
Yes.
And they're being handled, they're being run through a process, and they're being resolved, mitigated, usually without anything more to it. And so that was a barrier. That was a language, an understanding barrier that, hey, when a third party like me is being brought in, this isn't your ordinary, what you do day in and day out. This is now a much more critical incident. This is something that may be threatening your operations. It may involve exposure of significant amounts of sensitive data. It may involve regulatory reporting or a need to go and report to business partners. It's getting outside of the umbrella that we deal in, right? And so my point is to just differentiate between, you don't need to bring in third parties for every incident response situation, but these critical ones, you really do. And in those situations, legal has usually nothing to do with typical incident response.
Right. The day-to-day.
The day-to-day. They're doing their legal stuff, right? That's completely driven by the CISO and the security team and whoever's in charge of that. When it's a critical incident response situation, the technical resolution of these issues becomes secondary many times to the legal issues that are out there. And, for some of our cases, we find we're spending more time dealing with corporate communications and business partners and potential regulators and things like that than we're spending focused on the technical response, because that may be handled by a DFI or a firm that's being brought in, right, to do the forensics and negotiations with threat actors or whatever. So when you have that critical incident response situation, your legal counsel, like it or not, is going to probably take the lead, at least from a figurehead or a overall, hey, this is most important, now you come in with this, and this. It shouldn't be tense. It shouldn't be a, hey, this is my territory. You're really both in the lead.
It should be hand in glove, really.
It should be hand in glove, because one's addressing business issues and legal issues. The other's addressing the technical side of the incident response and all that goes with that.
So if I am a CISO working on establishing the line between routine and critical, and I know every company's different, so don't get me wrong, I'm not looking for, what are some of the hallmarks that one would see to be the difference between the two?
Every company's different, and every situation is different, and they may start as one and turn into quickly the other. And so agility is our first rule, right? That we've got to be agile and we've got to constantly be on guard. But if if it involves something where someone outside the organization is going to know about this, whether it's a business partner because you had to shut down their services, whether it's a regulator because you've got to report a ransomware attack to law enforcement, whether it's a breach of people's PHI information or PII, sensitive, right? Where it's going outside of the organization, you need to bring in. It's
pretty good
critical.
indicator.
So we've had cases, unfortunately, where we don't know anything's happening inside the organization yet, and a threat actor has been reaching out to a CEO. They thought it was, phishing, and next thing you know, the media is saying, "Hey, we've got evidence on this leak site here that your employee data has been posted." That just became critical.
Right.
When the media is involved, when it's public, when there's talk about it outside the organization, that's kind of the best rule that I have.
Where does the recent talk of materiality weave into this conversation?
That is a huge issue because materiality, again, it changes by organization and it changes by facts. And the standard for materiality is what would a reasonable investor want to know for making an investment decision about buying stock in the company or selling stock, right? And there again, so what we're seeing over-reporting. So materiality, this is for SEC, public companies that are regulated by the SEC, right? So we're seeing over-reporting for even non-material events because they don't want to take the chance of not reporting and getting hit later. And so there again, if there's even a question about materiality, you absolutely have to have not just your CISO, but your legal team, your corporate compliance, whoever's in charge of your SEC reporting involved, because that's now a serious situation.
Shawn Tuma, thank you so much. Well, we only covered a portion of what we thought we were going to cover, which didn't surprise me at all. I always keep a couple in my pocket but again, you're coming back. Plenty of time. We'll cover more chapters. We'll cover hottest topics like insurance, like we just covered today. But truly appreciate you coming on, man, and look forward to our next conversation probably sometime early in the new year.
I look forward to it as well, David. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Shawn.
Yep.
All right, gang. Colleagues and friends, I renew the call. It's time to professionalize the role of the CISO. In the meantime, I wish you health, happiness, and success in your journey in becoming the professional CISO. Let's do this.
We're professionalizing the CISO role, so please subscribe to the Professional CISO podcast.